This video is brought to you by Mountain Dew. What's up, guys? Michael here to dissect the latest South Park special from the nearly $1 billion Comedy Central gift that keeps on giving. Or at least giving us a reason to not cancel our Paramount Plus memberships. South Park Post-COVID, The Return of COVID, completes the show's journey into a sandwich of a future that feels uncomfortably close to our current reality. In our last quick take, we explored the show's depiction of alienation under capitalism. And part 2 also dives into this theme, via the Alexa character's profit-minded emotional manipulation.
You do whatever the you want and just destroy the people around you. And by the way, there's a tankless humidifier available from one of your favorite sellers. Would you like to know more?
And plenty of Blade Runner references.
Soon there will be a Space Jam 6 and 7 and 8, like tears in rain.
It also introduces grown-up Butters.
Well, hey, fellas!
Who, during an epic 16-year grounding, developed an obsession with NFTs, i.e. non-fungible tokens, to cope with the isolation. But other than this hilarious new development, the show doesn't take the alienation point that much further. But it does give us plenty to chew on. Like, how do you bring people together in a world that lacks a common truth? And what does the NFT boom tell us about ourselves? So join us as we masticate this quick take on South Park Post-COVID 2, less NFTs, more Tegridy. And as always, spoilers ahead. But before we get into it, I want to talk to you about something as chill as a fresh batch of Tegridy. That's right, this episode is brought to you by Mountain Dew. There are times when you're looking for something to drink and you know that only one drink will do. Mountain Dew. The next time you want a truly refreshing break, you deserve more than just to be satisfied. You deserve to be totally blown away, which is what you'll get from Mountain Dew. And now, back to the show. Now, ever since South Park first addressed this millennium's answer to the bubonic plague, it's been preoccupied with social fragmentation. So we weren't surprised to see more of this in the latest installment. Anti-vaxxer Clyde was already representative of the essential breakdown of collective social truths. Here, meaning the shared belief that we can trust scientists and that COVID vaccines save lives.
Hey, enough science! Who's science? Who's coming up with all this science? Yeah, that's true.
This is clearly a satirical take on the view that everybody, no matter their expertise level or reasoning, deserves to have their viewpoints be respected.
I am not ever getting vaccinated.
Sorry, ma'am, it's the future. We have to respect his beliefs.
And so it could be seen as a loose critique of postmodern philosophy. Postmodernism, while famously a favorite talking point of the most pretentious person in your board game crew, was also a hugely important late 20th century philosophical and artistic movement. Although, predictably, we're going to focus on its philosophy. It tended to revel in the implosion of meaning and questioned sweeping narratives, hegemonic ideologies, and objective knowledge. According to scholar Dick Hebbage, it eventually grew into something of a buzzword, describing a grab bag of ideas. That said, a lot of postmodernism had to do with the decline of truth. Sometimes philosophers were merely diagnosing the phenomenon, but sometimes they were straight up encouraging it. And this was not without consequence, at least according to philosopher Daniel Dennett, who is aggressively not a fan. He writes that postmodernism has largely played itself out in absurdity, but it has left behind a generation of academics in the humanities disabled by their distrust of the very idea of truth and their disrespect for evidence, settling for conversations in which nobody is wrong and nothing can be confirmed, only asserted with whatever style you can muster. If you've ever watched a debate on cable news, you might agree that this description of modern discourse seems pretty fair. Or if you've ever wondered why everyone happily got their new vaccines in the 1940s and today we just have this. We see a postmodernist-inspired rejection of objective truth and expertise in Clyde, whose refusal to get vaccinated ruins things for everybody.
Has everyone in your lab been vaccinated?
Yes, we are all vaccinated.
I'm not vaccinated.
That he single-handedly is responsible for the entire, potentially decades-long lockdown in South Park is indicative of what can go wrong when we can't find social stability and shared truths. So if there's nothing we can all believe in, what do we do? The episode ultimately finds an answer. Find some Tegridy. On a literal level, this means accept Randy's dank weed handout, get stoned, and start being nicer to your neighbors. So basically, just be more like Seth Rogen. But on a deeper level, the episode is asking, maybe even begging us, to find a shared collective belief to hold on to and unite behind. In a way, the show almost seems to be asking for a return to the peak of Enlightenment rationalism. Back then, philosophers, following in the Cartesian tradition, believed that as long as we could ground things in the holiness of mathematics, we could arrive at consistent and universal truths. This didn't mean that people couldn't disagree about art or what cheese was their favorite, but it did mean that knowledge grounded in math wasn't up for differing opinions. It can also be seen in the political philosophy of someone like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who argued for a type of universal humanism as a sort of grounding shared principle. These ideas aren't really about individual meaning and interpretation, which is paramount to postmodernism. They're more about finding norms we can all attach to that help us interact with one another meaningfully. Or, just get super blazed and hug it out. Now, this was all cool and made for a pretty fun final scene, but that wasn't actually the most interesting part of the special for us. Rather, we were most tickled by the subplot about grown-up Butters, now the NFT salesman from hell.
Have you ever heard of NFTs?
Now going by Vic Chaos, he literally leaves chaos wherever he peddles his wares.
Then these guys over here started saying those guys right there right-clicked them and called for a pump and dump, which made these guys beat the living hell out of anyone who said it was just FOMO and died screaming that it was the flippening. Luckily, I came out of it okay. I got this little miniature donkey with a lit-up sombrero.
The joke lands because NFTs, as we addressed in a previous video, have become a bona fide thing. But while hearing your brother-in-law wax poetic about his at-home crypto farm is the dictionary definition of intolerable, Butter's very annoying passion is more than just a funny gag. To understand, we need to look at what NFTs are really doing and why Matt and Trey seem less than stoked on it. According to art historian David Josselit, to understand how NFTs work in the art world, you can view them as reverse ready-mades. The most infamous ready-made is this urinal that you definitely can't afford, created by hugely influential nose thumber Marcel Duchamp. Duchamp pioneered the ready-made, i.e., art objects that were ordinary commercial products transformed into art by a title. Ready-mades reimagined the value and meaning of actual things that existed materially in the world. They problematized the entire idea of value in art by demonstrating how fungible, unstable, and potentially meaningless that value was. As Josselit explains, NFTs do the exact opposite work of ready-mades. They take things that don't exist in the material world and give them meaning precisely through their status as private property. If ready-mades turned commodities into complex art, NFTs turn art into a simple asset that can be invested in and speculated on. And speculated on they are in South Park, with great gusto. After years spent locked away in an insane asylum, where his snake oil salesman techniques can't hurt anybody, Butters gets his start by cleaning out a guard's entire financial portfolio.
Gone. My savings, my house. But I have this little green panda bear on a skateboard.
The absurdity of high-value NFTs is repeatedly undermined by their objective worthlessness as things to be owned, particularly when compared to real-life things that can be had and held.
They took the Tegridy. Here, it's a farting rainbow with Tom Brady's signature.
This is indicative of asset status. Typical commodities like socks and antique cars are valued by the amount of labor that went into their production, as well as things like market scarcity, use value, and other elements. Assets, in contrast, are valued for their speculative future value, a value divorced entirely from the labor that actually went into their creation. According to scholars Keen Birch and Fabian Muniesa, our era of techno-scientific capitalism is dominated by the asset over the commodity, as is demonstrated by the explosive growth of NFTs. This is part of a broader post-Great Recession embrace of what Karl Marx once called fictitious capital, i.e. the creation of value in a market that has no real-world correspondence. Like the stock market, which continued to flourish during the pandemic, even as millions faced financial ruin. For Marx, the ultimate capitalist wet dream was to be able to use money to create more money, because that's easier than going through the cumbersome process of, paying workers to produce commodities with actual tangible value. As scholar David W. Kupferman argues, we have entered a form of capitalism where exchange value is traded for exchange value. This is far from a post-capitalist world. This is the next iteration of capitalism, a flexing of its muscles that even Marx could not predict. This myth of creating money out of money is exactly what Butters promises his acolytes, some of whom are unable to participate in the workforce at all, and some of whom are presumably underpaid laborers.
But you are not seeing your true potential.
This vision of a new iteration of capitalism has been underscored by South Park ever since it catapulted us into this Blade Runner future, which, after all, showed a vision of capitalism that has created a permanent underclass. And the constant destruction that Butters leaves behind suggests that South Park sees the rampant speculation of the NFT market as potentially quite harmful. Maybe because paying millions of dollars to own a thing that isn't a thing, or even a receipt for a thing, isn't the best way to build a healthy economy, and that maybe the people selling people on the ideas of NFTs may profit, but the people actually buying them probably are mostly shit of luck.
You know what? F these people! Because what matters is these people right here, and that's us, baby!
You might be thinking, what's wrong with people speculating on dumb cat memes? Well, arguably, as assets continue to be defined less by the production cost of their creation and more by their speculative future worth, the very value of labor will be increasingly undermined. Kupferman says this effectively makes a parody of the entire idea of labor creating value. When value is abstracted from labor, it hurts the people doing real-world tangible labor. This makes the alternate, somewhat utopian ending of the episode quite fitting. This alternate reality finds Butters happily working at Denny's Applebee's, doing tangible labor that produces a material result. He gets people fed.
I love doing actual that pays actual money.
And it makes Randy's completely pro bono quest to get the entire town stoned to help them find a collective truth in being kind to one another all the more poignant. But what do you guys think? Are Matt and Trey deliberately advocating for a world free of crypto bros? And can all of our current strife be solved by a really good strain of Tegridy? Let us know in the comments. Thanks as always to our amazing patrons for valuing our labor, and don't forget to check out our podcast. Hit that subscribe button like it's Randy's laboratory grade bong, and don't forget to ring that bell. And as always, thanks for watching. Later.